I was just a researcher caught in her storm, seeking shelter. But when Lydia whispered, "Hold on to me," in the dark, it wasn't just the wind that shook me. What happened next would haunt me every quiet night. I never imagined that a routine research trip could turn into something that would etch itself into my memory forever. But there I was, Nolan Hargrove, 23 and barely out of grad school, facing down a sky that looked ready to unleash hell over Heron Key. The island was this rugged outpost off the Washington coast, all sharp cliffs plunging into the restless Pacific, dotted with a few stubborn cabins huddled around a tiny harbor. I'd arrived 2 days earlier on the ferry, backpacks stuffed with notebooks, a drone for surveying the land, and that naive optimism that ignores storm warnings. The locals at the dock had given me those knowing looks, muttering about the weather turning nasty, but I was determined to finish my thesis work on coastal erosion before packing up. Now, as the wind tore through the dense pines along Shoreline Trail, whipping branches like angry whips, I knew I'd pushed my luck too far. The rain started as fat, cold drops smacking against my face while I hustled back from the northern bluffs, where I'd spent the afternoon sketching rock layers and noting how the waves had carved away chunks of earth. My boots sank into the thickening mud with each step, the ground turning treacherous underfoot, and the air was thick with the briny tang of the sea, mixed with the sharp scent of wet evergreen. Heron Key wasn't much, 5 miles of wild terrain, home to maybe 200 people scraping by on fishing or guiding the rare tourist. The so-called main road, Driftwood Lane, was little more than a gravel snake winding past the weathered general store and a scatter of homes clinging to the hillside. I'd rented a sparse room in the old lighthouse keeper's cottage on the eastern tip, a place with creaky floors and a view of endless water, but as the storm built, I doubted I'd reach it without getting soaked to the bone or worse. That's when I spotted her, struggling against a massive fallen branch that had crashed across the path leading to her property. Her house stood isolated on a gentle rise above the bay, a faded blue Victorian with shutters banging in the gusts and a porch that wrapped around like an invitation to sit out the weather. I'd noticed it earlier that day, admiring the tidy garden beds fighting against the salt air. She appeared to be in her late 30s, perhaps 38, with dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail that whipped around her face, and eyes that held a depth born from facing down life's tempests. Her name was Lydia Farnan, though I wouldn't learn that until later. Right then, she was just a figure in a practical rain jacket, muscles straining as she heaved at the wood, determination etched in every line of her posture. "Hey, you need some help with that?" I shouted over the wind, jogging closer despite the rain picking up pace. She looked up, her green eyes narrowing for a split second, as if weighing whether I was a bother or a boon. "I've got it," she called back, her voice steady but laced with the strain of effort. She gave the branch another push, but it shifted only an inch, stubborn as the island itself. The wind howled louder, bending the trees into grotesque shapes, and thunder grumbled low on the horizon. "Doesn't seem like it," I replied, dropping my backpack to the ground and grabbing the other end without waiting for permission. The bark was rough and slick, biting into my palms as we both leaned in, muscles burning. Together we managed to roll it aside, clearing the path with a final grunt. Up close, I could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, signs of someone who'd smiled through hardships, now carrying a quiet resilience that made her seem both approachable and distant. She was striking, not in a flashy way, but with a natural beauty that didn't need enhancement. Freckles dusting her nose, skin tanned from outdoor life. "Thanks," she said, wiping her hands on her jeans, her breath coming in short puffs. "You're that researcher from the mainland, aren't you? The one holed up at the lighthouse?" "Yeah, that's me. Nolan," I said, offering my hand. She took it, her grip firm and calloused, speaking of hands that worked the soil or handled ropes on a boat. "Lydia, you really shouldn't be out in this. The storm's going to hit hard. The ferry's already shut down, and these paths turn into rivers fast." I was on my way back, I admitted, slinging my pack over my shoulder again. A fierce gust nearly knocked me sideways, and lightning split the sky, turning the world stark white for a heartbeat. Thunder followed, close enough to rattle my bones. She glanced at the darkening horizon, then back at me. "Your call, but if it gets much worse..." She trailed off, turning toward her house, the steps leading up to the porch slick with rain. I started down the trail, but the downpour exploded into a torrent, sheets of water blurring everything beyond arm's reach. My feet slipped on an exposed root, sending me stumbling, and I cursed quietly as mud splattered my legs. That's when her voice cut through the roar again. "Wait up!" She was at the edge of her path, gesturing urgently. "You won't make it to the lighthouse in this mess. Come inside until it blows over." I paused, water streaming down my face. Imposing on a stranger felt awkward, especially one like her, older, self-assured, with that air of having seen it all. But the storm was no joke. Branches were snapping overhead, and the trail ahead looked like a mudslide waiting to happen. "You sure? I don't want to be in the way." "It's no trouble," she insisted, her tone leaving no room for debate. "Better than you ending up in the bay." I followed her up the stone steps, the wind slamming the door shut behind us with a bang that echoed through the house. Inside it was a haven, warm air scented with wood smoke and something baking, like fresh bread. The living room opened up with high ceilings, walls lined with bookshelves overflowing with tomes on marine life and island history, and a sturdy stone fireplace where a low fire crackled invitingly. A wide window overlooked the bay, now a frenzy of whitecaps and rain-lashed waves. "Boots off," she said, peeling out of her jacket and hanging it on a peg. Underneath, she wore a soft sweater and fitted jeans, clothes that spoke of comfort over style, yet they accentuated her figure in a way that made me glance away quickly. I wasn't there for anything but shelter. Still, the awareness of her presence prickled at me. "Appreciate it," I said, toeing off my muddy boots and draping my coat nearby. The floorboards groaned softly under my socks, and my eyes caught the photos on the mantel. One of her with a man, both beaming on a boat under clearer skies, another of her solo, wind-tossed hair framing a thoughtful expression. No wedding ring on her finger, though the absence felt like a story untold. "Coffee?" she offered, moving into the adjoining kitchen with efficient grace. It was open and welcoming, copper pots gleaming from hooks overhead, a scarred wooden table that had seen countless meals. "Black, if you've got it." I perched on a stool, watching as she poured from a percolator on the stove, her movements precise. The lights flickered once, a warning from the grid, but steadied. At first, our talk was surface level, polite exchanges over steaming mugs. She quizzed me on my work, mapping erosion, how rising seas were nibbling at the island's edges year by year. I gestured animatedly, explaining data points and predictions, feeling a bit like a student defending his project. She listened with genuine interest, leaning on the counter, her chin propped on her hand. "Important stuff," she said. "Heron Key's been losing ground for as long as I've been here. We used to track the cliffs every summer, marking the changes." "Your family?" I asked, sensing the "we" carried weight. A shadow crossed her face, brief but telling. "My late husband. He was a fisherman, loved the science of it all. Lost him in a storm like this 5 years back." The words hit me like a cold wave. "I'm so sorry," I murmured, the phrase feeling too small for such a loss. She shrugged it off, but her gaze drifted to the window, where lightning danced across the turbulent sea. "It's the way of things here." Unforgiving. She topped off my coffee, her fingers grazing mine in the pass, a fleeting touch that sent an unexpected spark through me. I blamed the storm's charged atmosphere, the way it made everything feel amplified. As evening deepened, the conversation eased into something more real. The power cut out around 8, blanketing us in shadow, save for the candles she lit with steady hands. We shifted to the living room, claiming spots on the couch with a respectful distance between us, a throw blanket draped over the back like a silent offering. She opened up about her mainland roots, how love had drawn her to this isolated speck, the solitude that healed as much as it hurt. I confessed my own doubts, mounting student loans, the grind of proving myself in a field that felt abstract next to real life. "You're still so young," she said quietly, the candle flames playing across her features, highlighting the maturity in her expression. "Time's on your side to sort it out." "Maybe," I replied, holding her gaze a beat too long. There was an undercurrent there, a shared recognition that made the age difference feel both vast and insignificant. She carried the poise of someone in her late 30s who'd navigated profound loss, while I was still testing the waters of independence. Noticing the way the light softened her skin, the subtle curve of her smile, it stirred something I pushed down, reminding myself this was just temporary refuge. The wind escalated, shutters rattling like bones, and a thunderous boom made her startle, her hand clenching the armrest. Instinctively, I reached out, my fingers hovering near hers, not quite touching. She didn't recoil, and the moment lingered, thick with unspoken possibility, the storm outside echoing the turmoil I felt brewing within. We lingered in that charged space as the night wore on, the island sealed off from the world, the air between us shifting in ways I couldn't yet name. This was just the start. But he had no idea how quickly things could spiral out of his grasp. The storm outside Lydia's house on Driftwood Lane was a living thing, clawing at the walls with gusts that shook the old Victorian to its bones. Inside, the kitchen felt like a fragile sanctuary, the air heavy with the scent of tomato basil soup and the faint glow of candles casting wavering shadows on the walls. I sat at her scarred wooden table, my damp clothes clinging to me, the chill of the rain still lingering in my bones despite the warmth of the room. Lydia moved with a quiet purpose, stirring the pot on the gas stove, her silhouette sharp against the flickering light. She was older than me, closer to 40, I guessed, from the way her hands moved with practiced ease, from the faint lines etched around her eyes that spoke of years lived through joy and sorrow. At 23, I felt like an intruder in her world, a grad student out of his depth, yet here I was, sharing her space as the island drowned in chaos. "You don't have to play host," I said, trying to lighten the mood, my voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged kitchen. "I can head out if the storm lets up. Don't want to be a burden." She didn't turn from the stove, but her shoulders stiffened slightly. "You'd be halfway to the bay before you reached the lighthouse. The creek at Sable Point's probably a torrent by now. You're staying put, Nolan." Her tone was firm, but there was a warmth beneath it, like she wasn't entirely opposed to my presence. It made my stomach twist, not unpleasantly. I leaned back, the chair creaking under my weight. "Guess I owe you one, then. Not every day a stranger takes in a soggy researcher." "Lucky for you, I'm used to strays," she said, a faint smile breaking through as she ladled soup into bowls. She slid one across the table, steam curling upward like a promise of comfort. "Eat. You look like you're about to shiver out of your skin." The soup was rich, grounding, the kind of thing you'd crave after a day fighting the elements. I wrapped my hands around the bowl, grateful for the warmth seeping into my palms. "This is incredible. You grow the ingredients yourself?" "Tomatoes are from the garden," she said, settling across from me, her own bowl cradled close. "Herbs, too. Keeps me busy when the world feels like it's falling apart." Her eyes flicked to the window, where rain lashed the glass in relentless waves, and I caught a flicker of something. Worry, maybe? Or a memory she didn't want to share. We ate in silence for a while, the storm's roar filling the gaps. The kitchen was cozy but worn, copper pots glinting overhead, a stack of well-read books on marine life tucked into a corner. The window rattled with each gust, and I noticed her fingers tighten around her spoon, her gaze darting to the darkness outside. I wondered what it was like for her, alone in this house, the ocean's fury a constant reminder of what she'd lost. Asking felt like crossing a line, so I steered safer. "Those books," I said, nodding toward the living room's shelves, visible through the open doorway. "You into marine biology, or just collecting dust?" She followed my gaze, a shadow crossing her face. They were Daniel's, my husband. He was the scientist, always charting tides, studying currents. I kept them after he... She paused, her voice steady but heavy. "After he died, 5 years ago, in a squall off the coast." The words landed like a stone in my chest. "God, I'm sorry," I said, the phrase feeling inadequate, like trying to patch a shipwreck with tape. She waved it off, but her eyes lingered on the window, where lightning carved jagged paths across the sky. "It's how it goes here. The sea gives, and it takes." She refilled my bowl without asking, her fingers brushing mine as she passed the ladle. The contact was brief, a spark in the dim light, and I told myself it was nothing, just the storm making everything feel charged. After dinner, she suggested we check the upstairs windows. "This house is old," she said, grabbing a flashlight from a drawer. "Storms like this find every weak spot." I followed her up the narrow staircase, the wood creaking under our steps, the air cooler and mustier above. The second floor was a labyrinth of small rooms, one with a sewing machine and bolts of faded fabric, another with a desk buried under maps and journals, their pages yellowed and curling. Her bedroom door was ajar, revealing a neatly made bed and a single framed photo. Her and Daniel, younger, laughing on a dock, the kind of moment you hold on to when everything else falls away. "Here," she called from a small room with a slanted ceiling where water was seeping through a crack in the window frame. The flashlight beam danced across the walls, illuminating a stack of old fishing gear in the corner. Nets, ropes, a faded life preserver. We worked together, stuffing towels against the leak, our shoulders brushing as we pressed the fabric into place. Her hand grazed mine, lingering a fraction too long, and my breath caught, a jolt running through me that had nothing to do with the cold. The moment stretched, her eyes meeting mine in the dim light, and I felt the weight of our differences. Her life carved by loss, mine barely begun. "It'll hold," she said, stepping back, her voice breaking the spell. "For now, at least." She led the way downstairs, her steps sure but quick, like she needed distance. Back in the living room, the fire had dwindled to embers, and she poured us whiskey from a bottle on the mantel, the amber liquid glinting in the candlelight. "To not getting swept away," she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers, the sound sharp in the quiet. "To good Samaritans with warm houses." Her laugh was low, real, and it stirred something in me, a warmth that spread beyond the whiskey's burn. We settled by the fire, the couch creaking under us, a careful distance between our bodies. The storm's fury seemed to fade as we talked, her voice softening as she spoke of her early days on Heron Key, the way she'd fallen for Daniel's dreams of a life by the sea. "We thought we'd have forever," she said, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "Stupid, really, but that's what love does to you." I shared my own struggles, grad school loans piling up, the pressure to make my research mean something, the nagging sense that I was always one step behind where I should be. "Sometimes I feel like I'm running in place," I admitted, staring into the fire. "Like I'm supposed to know who I am, but I'm just guessing." "You're young," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You've got time to make mistakes and figure it out. Trust me, it's better than waking up at my age and realizing you've been holding your breath for years." Her words hit me hard, raw and unguarded, like she'd let me see a piece of her she usually kept locked away. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the weight she carried, the solitude of this house, the ghosts in those photos. The whiskey loosened my tongue, and I said, "You don't seem like someone who's just surviving. This place, your garden, the way you handle all this? It's more than that." She shook her head, a rueful smile tugging at her lips. "It's just what you do. Keep going, but sometimes—" She paused, her eyes flickering to mine, and the air shifted, heavy with something unspoken. Our knees were close now, not touching, but near enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence. I wanted to reach out, to close that gap, but the weight of her past, of our differences, held me back. She was a woman who'd lived through storms I couldn't imagine, and I was just a kid with a notebook and a drone. A thunderclap shook the house, and she flinched, her hand instinctively reaching for mine. Her fingers were warm, calloused, and she didn't pull away immediately. We sat there, hands barely touching, the fire's glow fading as the storm raged on, and I felt the pull between us growing stronger, impossible to ignore. What happens next will catch them both off guard. It's the kind of moment that leaves a mark you can't erase. The whiskey's warmth spread through me like a slow fire, but it did little to ease the knot of uncertainty twisting in my gut. Lydia's confession about holding her breath for years lingered in the air, heavy and intimate, making me acutely aware of the space between us on the couch. She was a woman in her late 30s, shaped by loss and resilience, her presence commanding yet vulnerable in the dim firelight. At 23, I felt outmatched, like a novice stepping into a world I didn't fully understand, yet the pull toward her was undeniable, a quiet force that made my heart beat unevenly. The storm outside hammered the house relentlessly, wind whistling through unseen cracks, as if urging us toward something irreversible. "I know that feeling," I said at last, my voice rough around the edges, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess them. "Like you're suspended, waiting for the other shoe to drop. My folks split when I was young, and I've been chasing stability ever since. Grad school, this thesis, hopping from one project to the next. Came to Heron Key thinking cliffs and data would ground me, but it's all just as unpredictable as the rest." She shifted to face me fully, her green eyes catching the ember's glow, searching my face with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "Drifting has its place," she replied softly, her words measured. "It led you here, didn't it? Sometimes the tide brings what you need, even if you fight it." The age gap loomed unspoken, a barrier woven from her experiences and my inexperience, yet in that moment it felt like a bridge rather than a wall. We were both adrift in our ways, seeking anchor. Our talk deepened as the night stretched on, the whiskey loosening knots I didn't know were there. She painted pictures of her life with Daniel, buying this creaky house as newlyweds, their dreams of filling it with laughter and children that never came, the way the sea had claimed him in a blink, leaving her to rebuild alone. "We thought time was endless," she said, her fingers absently tracing patterns on her glass, her voice laced with a quiet ache. "But it's not. You learn to cherish the moments, even the hard ones." I opened up about my own fractures, relationships that fizzled in college because I was too buried in books, too scared to let anyone in close. "You're wise to guard yourself," she said, her tone gentle. "At your age, everything hits harder, but walls can trap you as much as protect you." The living room grew dimmer as the candles burned low, the fire reduced to glowing coals that cast long shadows across the walls. She rose to stoke it, adding a log with careful hands, her sweater slipping slightly off one shoulder, revealing a glimpse of skin that made me avert my eyes quickly. It wasn't just attraction. It was a deeper recognition, like seeing a reflection of my own loneliness in her. When she sat back down, closer this time, our shoulders brushing, the air thickened, charged with the storm's energy and something more personal. "You remind me of him," she confessed suddenly, her voice a whisper that cut through the wind's howl. "Not the face, but the listening. Like you see beyond the words." Her hand rested on the cushion, mere inches from mine, and I felt the invisible thread pulling us together. "I do see," I replied, my throat tight. You've been through hell, Lydia. No one should carry that solo. The words felt bold, exposing a vulnerability I usually kept hidden, but her gaze held mine, steady and inviting. A massive gust rattled the shutters, lightning flashing bright enough to illuminate the room like daylight, thunder crashing so close it vibrated through the floorboards. She startled, her hand flying to her chest, then reaching out instinctively, her fingers grazing my arm. "Sorry," she murmured, but she didn't withdraw, her touch lingering, warm and tentative. In that instant, the barriers crumbled, the age difference, her grief, my transience, all fading against the raw need for connection. "It's all right," I said, my hand covering hers, the contact sending a shiver through me. Her fingers interlaced with mine slowly, as if testing the waters, and time seemed to suspend. We sat there, hands clasped, the fire's faint warmth mirroring the one building between us. My mind raced with doubts. This was wrong, wasn't it? She was a widow, rebuilding her life. I was a visitor, here today and gone tomorrow. But the storm isolated us, making the outside world feel like a myth, and her presence grounded me in a way nothing else had. "Lydia," I began, my voice barely audible over the rain's drumbeat. "I don't know where this is going, but don't," she cut in softly, her thumb stroking the back of my hand. "Not everything needs a label. Sometimes it's just this." Her eyes held mine, a mix of fear and longing, and I leaned in, drawn by an invisible force. My free hand cupped her cheek, feeling the softness there, the faint tremor under her skin. She didn't pull away. Instead, her eyes fluttered shut, a soft sigh escaping as our faces drew closer. The house plunged into near darkness as the last candle flickered out, the only light now faint slivers from the storm-tossed sky. In the blackout, her voice came urgent and soft. "Nolan, hold on to me." I did, without hesitation. My arms encircled her, pulling her against me, her head nestling into my chest as if it belonged there. It started as comfort, a shield against the night's fury, but evolved into something deeper, her body molding to mine, warm and real. I buried my face in her hair, inhaling the mingled scents of rain, lavender, and her, my hands tracing soothing paths along her back. She trembled slightly, perhaps from the cold or the weight of the moment, and I held her tighter, whispering reassurances that felt as much for me as for her. As the hours blurred, our touches grew more intentional, her fingers mapping the line of my jaw, my lips pressing gentle kisses to her forehead. When our mouths met, it was slow, exploratory, a question answered in the press of lips, tasting of whiskey, and shared secrets. The kiss deepened, fueled by the loneliness we'd both voiced. A release of pent-up emotions in gasps and sighs. We shifted on the couch, bodies entwining under the throw blanket, clothes shed layer by layer with reverence, each reveal a step into vulnerability. Her skin was soft, marked by life's traces. A faint scar from a garden mishap, a freckle pattern like stars, and I traced them with care, murmuring how her strength moved me. She responded with equal tenderness, her hands exploring my form, whispering that I made her feel seen, alive in a way she hadn't for years. The storm eased as dawn crept in, the wind softening to whispers, rain dwindling to a patter on the roof. We lay tangled, her head on my shoulder, breaths sinking in the quiet aftermath. "This can't continue," she said eventually, her voice tinged with sorrow, fingers tracing idle patterns on my chest. "You're heading back soon, and I'm not sure I'm ready for more." I nodded, the truth stinging even as I understood. "I get it. But tonight,